Good morning, Sean here, Mountains Garage. Do you ever wonder if you're just testing yourself to see how much you can take? Lately in the shop, it feels that way because it is a complete disaster because I'm rearranging and cleaning, trying to do some other stuff in between to keep me entertained and moving other projects along. Yesterday, for instance, I was building shelves to put out in the storage box with help from my 10-year-old son because it's also Sean camp for the summer. We completed that, and I was waiting for the UPS truck because I had a complete 9-inch Ford center section I need to build that we're actually going to do today. It showed up at my house last night, UPS, at 8:51 p.m. I didn't get much done on it yesterday, that's for sure. So I came out early this morning with the boxes to unpack. I got a call from a friend of mine who was in the mood to sell some stuff. So next thing you know, I bought a set of big block Chevy aluminum cylinder heads and a Yukon tunnel ram. So let's show you what I got going on. Oh, I forgot to mention, while I was waiting for the UPS truck yesterday afternoon, I stripped the second Pontiac HD 400 case transmission, and it's in a lot of ways uglier than the first one. So let's go over the highlights and then get to work. This is a second heavy-duty Pontiac transmission, and these bell housing reinforcements are much more visible than the other case. They're actually different, and I'll show you them both. The other case has been cleaned once. The inside of this will clean up. The bottom where the sculch set isn't so pretty, but when I first pulled the pan, this and the valve body look exactly the same. It's something, but I believe it's going to clean up. I sheared off 6 pan bolts. I had them wiggling back and forth, and when I would go back toward the tight direction, it would shear the bolt right off because they were pretty rusty. So I'll be able to weld nuts on them and get them out. Typical fashion, kind of like an LS exhaust manifold bolt. The tail housing came right off this one. I didn't hurt the threads there. This may end up being a better case, but like the other one, it's going to need a lot of cleaning. The throwaway pile, well, that white box is a keep. Everything in the pan's a throwaway. Surprisingly, this transmission, being a 72, has the roller style sprag, if you will, not the good one. So that's a throwaway drum anyway, probably. Once I get the piston out of it, the piston's kind of stuck at the moment. I'll probably clean up and save one tail housing output shaft assembly, or maybe try to sell them all. I don't know when I would use them unless you happen to have a dry shaft and you were building a one-off street rod or something, and it was more efficient to just change the output shaft and use what you have. These are the parts from the first Pontiac HD case transmission I stripped. They've been washed for several hours. I've ordered a 5-gallon bucket of evapo-rust. I'm going to see if that'll maybe take some of that off and make them look a little prettier. All the planetary gears spin at this point. Some of the stuff is better than others. I'd like to save as much as possible. It's a lot of work. This is the parts out of the second transmission. In some cases, things look better over here. In other cases, about the same, sometimes worse. This is the first Pontiac HD case I stripped, and you can see these lugs are completely different. There's still 4 of them, but they're not as pretty. This case inside has got a permanent black stain throughout the whole thing. But other areas are going to clean up okay, I believe. I have to heel coil 1 tail housing bolt. That's not a big deal. But this has that permanent black stain. I may try blasting it, but this is already washed in the parts washer for about 4 hours. So we'll see. We'll cut the bell housing off and start modifying it and see if it's worth saving. It also has a bore sleeve in the modulator hole that I've really never seen before. So I got to investigate that a little bit further. See if that's stock or something somebody put in afterwards. I don't know. These are the 2 cylinder heads, big block Chevy, 340cc, fully assembled, Liberty Performance heads. These are the same heads. They actually came from a mutual friend of the guy I bought them from this morning. I'm also good friends with him. He's a dealer for him. Excuse me. I'm still fighting this cold, too. That's why I'm home alone today and everybody else is out having fun. I have a set of Liberty Performance small block heads, 200cc on that car. I haven't really got a chance to see, my experience with them, but my engine building friends say that Liberty Performance heads are good. For the price. They're made to compete with the other imported heads, but nobody, I think they're machined and assembled over here with some American parts, so I guess it's the best of both worlds. I can't complain for the price and a brand new, never installed, new old stock, if you will, rectangular port, big block Chevy tunnel ram, Wyand. That's cool. That was an after negotiation deal. I went over with money. I paid him, and then he wanted some stuff I had, so he gave me money back. In the end, I haven't counted to see even where I ended up, but that's typically how it goes with me and this guy. I'll end up owing him something. He'll end up buying something else. Who knows? And now the real reason why we're here for this video today. I'm going to assemble this. It's a Yukon 3.25 Baron that always reference the carrier Baron. Outside diameter, 3.25 inches. Aluminum through bolt. My experience with these is I'll end up grinding it. I know I will, because the ring gear won't clear, but I'm hoping for the best. It's going to have a 40 spline spool, a 370 big pinion, ring and pinion, aluminum Daytona style support, a Billet 1350 yoke, 1350 U-joint, and if I can get it open, your bearing kit with a solid pinion spacer. Excuse me, I'm sorry I'm coughing, but sorry, that's just the theme of the day. I'm trying to shake this cold. And I have a lot, several, 3 or 4 9-inch Ford assembly videos, so I'm only going to touch on the highlights, like here's all these parts in front of you. How do I go about putting it together? So let's get after it. The first step for me is always unpacking and inspecting everything. Making sure you got all your hardware. And this kit is really good. If you were installing this in the middle of the field or on the side of the road, you'd have pretty much everything you need. I like how the solid pinion spacer, the shims themselves go inside these 2 pieces, so you have a contained unit, which is nice. I'm going to go ahead and make sure my surfaces are perfectly flat. And the beauty of a 9-inch Ford is you can install all your bearing. You put the bearing races, inner and outer, in the pinion support. I can go ahead and press on my carrier bearings because all the adjustments are outside the bearings, which is a brilliant design. I wish they were all like this. So you can go ahead and just install all your bearings. Nothing to worry about. Your pinion depth is not anything to do with putting the bearing on. I love the 9-inch Ford. Other than the shims look like they're made to shim around corners, we're pretty good. I mentioned this is a big pinion rear end. It's going in a Turbo LS G-body Malibu, like they say on TV, Malibu. For a good friend of mine, and he wanted large pinion, 40 spline. These are the inner and outer pinion bearings. Let's compare the large inner to the small inner. This kit here is for a small pinion bearing rear end. Not as drastic as the inner. The inner just flat dwarfs the small pinion rear. And for reference, if you're looking under your car, you have a 9-inch Ford, you want to know what you have. The small pinion nut is very small. It's way down inside the yoke. The big pinion nut is huge. There's no way to not know you have a big pinion. So, something to look for. Let's quickly refresh our 9-inch Ford terminology. You have 2 options in pinion spline size. Small pinion, big pinion. Small pinion is 28 splines on the pinion yoke. Big pinion is 35 splines on the pinion yoke. These have nothing to do with the splines for the axles. Those are available 28, 31, 33, 35, or in this case 40 spline. So my buddy wanted big pinion, 40 spline. The carrier bearing sizes are determined by the housing. You have 2.89 being the smallest, 3.06 being the most popular. In this case is a 3.25 if we were to measure across. Pretty much anything with a 35 spline or bigger axle is going to have a 3.25 housing. So you have three basic options in carrier bearing size when buying a housing, and of course you have steel or aluminum, through bolts or not, lots of options. The yoke as well, you have options U-joint size, material the yoke is made out of, and the length. So you can have a 1310 U-joint, 1330, 1350, 1410, 1480. 1350 is the most popular in race cars, and I prefer the billet steel. Things are progressing nicely. My best advice for rear end work is to take your time, turn the radio on, just relax, and try to do your best job without wrecking something, because you have to apply force. I have little pieces of pipe. This one I turned down. This is a piece of black iron left from plumbing my oil tanks for my furnace. My goal is to miss, let's just take the race off for a second. I don't want to hit the cage. I want to press on the inner part of the bearing. I can't do any damage there. Now some people press on the race, which puts the force through the roller into the inner race. I guess if you had no other way to do it, that's not the right way. That's all I can tell you. The right way is to press on the inner piece, the inner race. So, same goes for the pinion. I just have a piece of pipe. I turned it down a little bit. And the whole time I'm pressing, the race is free. Everything's good. You can't do any damage that way. This all went together fantastic. Got the ring gear bolted on. Now I'm working on the pinion preload. I've done videos where I've broken this down into subjects. It's all in the playlist. If you're interested, check it out. This I'm going to go ahead and do it and just show it to you when it's done. I have a video where I do nothing but set the pinion preload on a 9-inch Ford using the shims instead of a crush collar. In that video I joked that if I ever put it together the first time and it felt perfect, I wouldn't trust it. That was the case here. I took it all back apart, which is you have to get a puller set up and pull this back off because the outer pinion bearing is really tight on the pinion stem. And I subtracted about 4 thousandths from the shim stack, put it back together, and then it was starting to get too tight. So I did indeed nail it on the first try, and about 3 or 4 thousandths does make a difference in drag, but this one's perfect. This pinion does have the checking distance. 1.027, if you can read that. And they give a pretty good job in the illustration on a 9-inch Ford. You go from the center of the axle, which you gotta go from the bearing cap, I'll show you that in a second, to the actual head of the pinion stem, should be 1.027. You have to measure from the half down and the half up to make sure this parting line is centered. I've mentioned that before. And from there you can do your math, measuring down to the head of the pinion through this hole. I think it's going to clear without grinding. I always run into trouble here. But in this case, I think it's going to be okay. Looks like they took more than normal. Maybe they listened to some feedback. If I actually get this together without having to grind, I'm going to be happy. I wait to put the tail bearing in the housing until I'm done grinding because it makes a big mess and you have to keep taking the bearing out. At least in this Yukon through bolt, the tail bearing for the pinion, the third bearing, is held in with a snap ring instead of this Ford nightmare here. So, all is good. Let's see what happens. And it also seems no matter how many times you've done it, when you finally put the pinion seal in for good, which in this case I have to drive the outer pinion bearing down on the stem with everything in place. Install the seal over the pinion stem. I have a rig I made for that. Right here. So it'll actually fit down over. And put the pinion knot on for real. You always hope when you finally reach down that it still spins correctly. And there's no reason why it shouldn't. In the worst case, you're going to ruin a $5 seal, but maybe $10 seal. But every time you do it, you're thinking in the back of your mind, gee, I hope I have this correct. And I've literally done it. I don't know how many times. And it's never been wrong because I check it 3 times. But I guess that's human nature. I'm only human. I said that this morning. I place the pinion assembly into the housing with no shim. And without this cap on, using my depth mic, it measured 1 inch down to the stem exactly. So it was pretty easy to add 27 thousandths of shim. And then go ahead and reassemble the top. You got to make sure you put this bolt in because this is behind the pinion. The other 3 are through bolt. This is behind the pinion. So if you mess that up, you got to pull the pinion back out. I set the backlash to 10 thousandths. You can pretty much have a feel for it. The adjustments are kind of crude if you're going to get these to line up, so you got to choose a hole pretty much. It's either too tight, too loose, or just right. Right back to Goldilocks and the 3 bears. I always check it with some yellow stuff. They give it to you anyway, and it was fine. But you kind of got to commit to a method. You're going to go to the depth that they give you on the pinion when they give it to you. It was run in on a machine with that number, or you're going to go by what you think looks good. So in this case, I liked them both. I'm going to say, using this Yukon aluminum housing this time, I was more impressed than I have been in the past. The bolts didn't get scary torquing them up. And I didn't have to grind down here, so I'm pretty happy. I do put a little clear RTV on the shoulder of the through bolts before I tighten them up to make sure oil can't weep out of there. Because trust me, oil will find its way out of everywhere in these things. You have to kind of tweak the locks in to engage in the holes because they're both in pretty far, but no problem. They give you plenty of material to work with. The whole thing went together really nice. Sometimes they fight you, sometimes they don't. So this whole project, start to finish, took just over 6 hours on a Saturday afternoon. It's done. I can deliver it next week and get back to all the other distractions I got going on. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.